Much. Enjoy the next 3 days.
Could we request Mr. Aziz Bulani to just say a few words, please? Thank you.
Let me start by congratulating all of you for the great recognition by UNESCO as Lahore being recognized as the city of literature. LLF, to me, is a great platform for learning about our own culture. Unfortunately, over a period of time, we have not given enough about our own heritage, about our own culture. And what Razi and his team, the dedicated board of directors, have done, it's amazing. It's a cross-learning, it's learning from the world-renowned speakers, journalists, historians. And one of the reasons Serena is partnering with LLF, and I believe for the last 5 years, is because we also value the culture and heritage. And we ensure that we not only protect, but promote our heritage. And this is reflected in our interiors also, whichever hotel you walk in. We value, and if you look at the countries across the globe, they have used their cultural and heritage values for tourism purposes, which generates revenue and steers their economy. Unfortunately, Pakistan has not taken advantage of its cultural assets. I hope the current government will concentrate, as this is part of their agenda. You can think about how Serena has been sharing this subject, because we are passionate. We opened an art gallery right in the middle of Islamabad Serena Hotel, Satrang Gallery. It started 7 years back, and the whole idea was to promote art and artisans. What Razi and his team are doing, we are also trying to do in a humble way. Music is also part of our heritage. We are promoting music under the banner of Sarangi. And we have promoted and brought these unknown, talented musicians through search, and they are amazing. And my recollection is the last season, which was won, was a young girl of 15 years age from Lahore. And we need to encourage these talents. We need to do the hand-holding. And your attendance today shows that you would like to join hands with those who are promoting our own culture and our own values. We are training women on traditional embroideries. We can go on, and we feel that it's important from country's point of view, from our point of view, and we need to take pride in our own heritage. I'll not go long, but before I take my seat, I wish all the delegates an immersive experience and traditional Lahori hospitality. And I hope you will interact for opportunities, for thoughts, and for a better world. Thank you.
We request Ms. Kamanara now, please. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I am absolutely delighted to be back in Lahore and to be here at the Lahore Literary Festival. I am not a literature critic, but I'm a literature lover, because literature allows you to step into the shoes of other people, to travel to different times, different areas, and experience things that you would otherwise not experience. And even if the book refers to where you know, the area where you live, or the place that you know, to experience this from a totally different perspective. So in that sense, it allows you to understand other people. It allows you to step into other people's shoes. Let me share with you personal, let's say, a secret, because particularly of Mr. Pamuk sitting next to me. In fact, many, many years back, I started learning Turkish just to be able to enjoy your books in its original. I got as far as reading one of your short stories with 15 dictionaries next to me, but nonetheless, that's how motivated I was to read it in its original. And the same thing happened to me with trying to read French and studying French to read Michel Tournier or Isabel Allende, and I studied Spanish. So it opened a whole world for me. So to go back to my professional role, the EU is very proud to be supporting this event. You may ask, why is the EU so interested in supporting a literary festival in Pakistan? Well, let me answer by saying, first of all, that the EU is a very, very close partner of Pakistan from many different angles. We are, from a trade perspective, for example, we are the #1 export destination of Pakistani goods, with 1/3 of your exports going to Europe, with development cooperation, with exchanges and on political terms. Last year, for the first time, the EU and Pakistan signed a strategic engagement plan, and in it, for the first time, cultural diplomacy and cultural exchanges were identified. Why? Because the EU has been formed on with the fundamental logic that culture is vital and cultural diversity is something to be celebrated and nourished, and not only our cultural diversity, but the cultural diversity of others. And Pakistan is so rich in those aspects. So I don't want to take much more of your time, apart from saying that I looked at the program, and it requires new science, like being able to clone yourself, to be able to go to all of these multiple interesting sessions. So I would like to thank Razi and his team for putting such a fantastic program together, and wish you all as much joy from participating as I'm sure I will have. बहुत शुक्रिया.
Would we please request Mr. Orhan Pamuk to just come and say a few words? The session after this is Mr. Pamuk, so if we could just have a few words from you, Mr. Pamuk. Yes, please. Thank you.
Hello, it's so nice to be here. Salaam alaikum, alaikum salam, and all that. I thought I will be talking to you. It's such a great pleasure for me. I came here only, I think, 6 hours ago. This is my first time, I'm embarrassed to say, in Pakistan, and I'm happy that the Lahore is the first town that all my childhood, whenever there is Pakistan, there was Lahore and Iqbal.
Can we ask Ms. Muniza Hashmi, please, to say a few words? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning. It is my privilege as the chairperson of Alhamra Lahore Arts Council to welcome the LLF again, and I hope that we will have a wonderful next 3 days, today included. As we know, and we are very, very proud of the fact that Lahore has been designated as the city of literature. And I think it is festivals such as wonderful moment of pride. So Lahore Arts Council has always been a place where wonderful cultural events, artistic events, performing arts have all had an occasion to perform, to show you, to be a part of your lives, and I hope that will continue. Thank you, Razi, thank you for his team, and thank you all for coming. Enjoy the next 3 days.
We will now begin our session with Mr. Ahmed, Rashid and Mr. Orhan Pamuk. And may I please ask our distinguished guests to please take the seats so we can start. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can hear me at the back. It's a very great pleasure to be back working with the LLF. I just want to add to a few words to what Razi already said. First of all, thanking the students for all their efforts in helping us set this up in an organized manner. And secondly, as you all realize, we've had a very tough time financially because of the economic situation. But I want to thank all those who have donated to the LLF, especially those who donated at the last minute at my appeal and who donated big or large sums. I want to thank them very much. Thank you. Now, there's a history here between myself and Orhan, which is that for the last 5 years, I've been writing to him constantly. And it became, at one point, a bit of a joke, but writing to him constantly to come to Lahore. And he was busy, he had other things on his mind, etc. So it was an extraordinary kind of epiphany when he said to me in one email that I'm ready to come. And I said, you will be welcomed more than any, we've never had a Nobel Prize winner, author, and we've never had someone so illustrious, somebody who's written so many books and so many novels and is known around the world, such as Orhan Pamuk. Thank you.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy to be here too. I apologize for coming 5 years late.
So let's start with Istanbul. I mean, you were born there, you were raised there, you adore the city, you've written numerous books about the city, and many people have compared you to Charles Dickens' love for London and Naguib Mahfouz's love for Cairo. But I think you're not just a descriptive writer, you're an activist when it comes to the city. You want to beautify it more, you want to improve its facilities. Tell us about your story with Istanbul.
Okay, then there is of course Borges and Buenos Aires, Prague and Kafka, St. Petersburg and Dostoevsky, on and on. So there is a tendency in literary reviews, journalism, in generally speaking, in humanity, to associate some writers with some cities. I am one of the lucky writers who are associated like this. At the beginning, there was no intention of being an Istanbul writer. I was not even thinking of Istanbul. I am living in Istanbul for the last 68 years, so I wanted to write about my family, my friends, what I know about life. So I wanted to write about humanity, stories, anecdotes, everything that all the other authors are doing. And no one said, yeah, you're a writer, you're talking about human beings. But once I begin to get translated internationally, everyone began to call me Istanbul, Istanbul, Istanbul. No one said that to me in Turkey before. In Turkey, they were saying, well, why don't you write about peasant problems? And my answer, frank answer, I don't know them. I live in Turkey's Lahore, and I know the old town or the new bourgeoisie who is living in the old town. My behavior was like this in the first 15, 20 years of my literature. After mid-1990s, now that I am known internationally as an Istanbul writer, Turkish critics, the international critics calling me Istanbul, 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 which made me self-conscious about my town, and that I can also write about other parts of Istanbul, which is growing immensely. Once I was born into it, it was a city of 2.5 million. Now they say it's 17 million. And I am also proudly saying this. Paris grew from, let's say, 1 million to whatever it is now, 15 million in 200 years, while Istanbul did that in 60, 70 years while I was inside all the time. How many authors, I say, thank God, how many authors you know whose city grew from 2 million to 17 million just because in his lifetime? I am so privileged. Wouldn't you be writing? And I was inside all the time, so wouldn't you be writing about that? And they're saying, why are you obsessed about Istanbul? I'm not obsessed. It's normal that I write all about this. In fact, now that people are asking Istanbul, Istanbul too much, sometimes I want to avoid it. But of course, it's different, it's everything. How can you talk about your life in such a simple way? That I am made up of that town, I am self-conscious of it, but it's not easy talking about it, sugarizing, posing in a romantic post-romantic. Never say that.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. You grew up, wanting to be an artist, and you're a student of architecture. By the way, he's bought a book on architecture of Lahore in his suitcase, which I just saw. So he's still very, very keen on architecture and art, but he is a writer. And how did that leap happen? How did that occur?
Okay, there are so many to your really a question that involves me so deeply. Let's go to the superficial side, which is not superficial that much, is that I come from a family of engineers, civil engineers. My grandfather was a civil engineer, so is my father and my uncles, and they were making my grandfather, and they were well-to-do. And what everyone expected me to go to the same engineering school, Istanbul Technical University, which I did. And everyone expected me to be a civil engineer again. I was good in class, I can't, but since I was drawing and painting after the age of 7 all the time, and everyone was saying, wow, you're so good, why don't you be an architect? It's a combination of technicality and some art, they thought. So I enrolled and began to study architecture for 3 years. But as I always tell, and these are the last pages of my book, Istanbul, something was loose in my screws. One of the screws was loose. I decided that I cannot be an architect. Why don't I be a writer, which is good for those who has one screw loose? And it all worked. But this question came back. My planned life program was to be something like Le Corbusier. He is, in his private time, a painter, artsy person, but you have to make some money and be an architect. So I planned that life, which didn't work because of this loose screw, and up being a writer, but this subject came back to me. I killed psychologically the painter in me, but it resurrected. The subject came back. I wrote My Name is Red, a book about painters, and so on. So it's still in me. The painter that is dead in me, actually, Ahmed did not die. It resurrected. That I am also painting now, doing little things, and I also consider myself a visual writer. I do my literature through visuality, description. And it's not over. The struggle between the painter and the writer in me is not over. The writer won it socially. The painter is socially very down. But then I also like painting. In fact, I make this joke all the time. When I paint, I am like a guy in the shower singing all the time. But when I write, I am not like that. I'm very tortured. But when I look at my painting and look at my writing is much more deep. While my painting, there is something that I'm not happy with. Partly it is that I didn't have time to do it because suddenly I'm a writer and continued.
Have you exhibited your art? I mean,
no.
Have you made it public?
One or twice, just to be nice to a person. Can I show this in this museum? Okay, but not an intention. But I have radical ambitions, but, likes of mine, keep them in their pockets.
Yeah. So this is, art is going to, you'll disclose your art in old age when...
yes, exactly like this. But there are also, look, I'm Swedish playwright August Strindberg is one of the great watercolorists in the world.
Okay. Well, that's something to remember. I really want to ask you about, your range of what you write about is so extraordinary. And quite simply, I think that's what really convinced the Nobel Committee to award the award with you, because you've written thrillers and love stories and historical epics and about the Ottomans and about art. You have just it's not a one-dimensional or a two-dimensional series of books you write, but you write across a huge range. I mean, has this come naturally to you?
Yes, but it is also an idea. When the art of novel was invented in mid-19th century, around 1840s, 50s, Dickens, Balzac, they were so infatuated with their invention. For another 50 years, no one thought of changing this form. But beginning in modernism, say the generation of 1880s, 1890s, when they begin to write, then it's not only being Balzac or Dickens and writing about social or describing things, it's also being a novelist. After the beginning of the 20th century, also included not only the content or social or whatever you see, but also you play around with form, you invent form. There is Picasso, there is so much novelty going on in other venues that you cannot continue to write like Balzac 100 years later. It was natural, normal, and it is what is expected of you if you are a serious creative writer. If you're a serious creative writer and only writing like a journalist, that doesn't count when I begin writing, that you have to also formally inventive, seeing the world not only subject-wise. Istanbul was a novelty in my books, but if I only wrote about Istanbul in Balzac style, no one would be reading me all over the world. I also wrote about Istanbul with a fictional acrobatics, inventing things, being postmodern one day, doing another thing another day, writing my autobiography in such a way that it's also a cultural book, so forth and so on. So, yes, Istanbul made me attractive, I didn't know about that, but later, my luck of combining that with modernism, formal experimentation, I'm also proud of that.
You also have an extraordinary range of characters who live in your novels, and they are sometimes they're telling the story. You have multiple characters telling what is, as you said, a single novel story. How do these characters emerge from your head? Are they living there in your mind, and you bring them up to the surface, and you then push them back again and bring up a new one? How do you keep 20 characters, 25 characters at the tip of your fingers?
Look, okay, then I have 25 characters in a novel, say, there are major characters, minor characters, then I also wrote, now finishing the 11th novel, so I had 250 characters. In fact, my publisher is planning a sort of a dictionary of characters, but it's not hard for me. You triggered a very important subject that I would not dare to discuss in Paris, but I want to discuss it here. I will just say the headline and then open you to a discussion. It is this: the concept of character is exaggerated in European fiction, or they may have more character than us, or their minds may be more busy with character than our minds are busy with character. This is about character. Then the word character is also used as a figure in a novel. Maybe you're only referring to that. But our idea of a character or a character of a figure is also based on the novels, literary reviews, feuilletons. So Balzac writes a novel and everybody's like, oh, Father Goriot, that's a character. That's how a father is. And humanity learns that through the advertisements of Karl Marx, and they all read this, and they, in character. He has this character, he has that character. That is actually insistence on character that much, or two-dimensional character is medieval, actually. If you read 18th, 17th century Ottoman travel writer Evliya Çelebi, you would see people from Trabzon has this character. People from Ankara has that character. This guy is focused on character. Yes, European character is a bit more developed, but more or less assigning particular character to Ahmed and you're finished. You always have... Yeah. We are afraid of characters. Character, I think, is an exaggerated concept. I don't have that much of character as in Balzac novels, but I'm okay. I'm doing fine. And I would also see that much of character, implying all this exaggeration of character implies that novelists go into that subject and find a character so mystical, they even claim that I'm not writing the novel, characters are forcing me this direction, that direction. It's all ideology, illuminate. Don't believe it. It's not like that.
No, but I mean, have these characters been, if you take a novel like Snow, perhaps you can discuss that, you know, where you've got everything from fundamentalists to people living in the middle of a snowstorm and the whole a love story. Are these people, I mean, okay, I presume you went to Anatolia at some stage and you picked up some facts, but are these people living in your mind all the time?
Okay.
Or
okay.
Are they just, you just pick them out like that? You see somebody on the street and you say, you know, this will be my character. I mean,
no.
How does it work?
But, okay, maybe I'll tell you the theory of Russian formalist theoretician who is also a novelist, Viktor Shklovsky, I may be mispronouncing his name, developed a theory about plot, storyline. He claimed, and that also explains, he wrote that actually the storyline in a novel is a vehicle, is something that comes late. Say, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about your beautiful red cravat, necktie, I want to talk about this atmosphere, and also some of my memories, okay? And a plot line that connects all of these. There are stars here, there are things here, there are things here, there are things here. Well, I want to write about all. So I have to invent, I stole your this and you were wearing that, some story that connects this. So I, in a good way, write about these subjects. I argue the way this formalist Russian Shklovsky put a plot line is actually better to understand what a character is. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about Islamic, political Islam, Islamic fundamentalism, most radical and the most peaceful. I want to talk about this. This was the intention to write the novel Snow. I want to explore it. I don't know. I also read so much when I was writing the novel, but I want to experience it. I went to the northern eastern town of Kars. I read all the newspapers. I researched and lived in that town for a while. Then I wrote the novel, a quarter of which I already had it. A town is cut off because of snow from the rest of Turkey. I knew that. And some people do a military coup and have what you see in the book. I had that story, but not the details. So I needed a location to set that. And I knew that town is perfect for that. So I went there, did my best to, hello, I'm here to write about you, as a journalist, I lied a bit. And then I stayed there and wrote the book. It cost so much time, attention, carefulness, but on the other hand, through these vehicles, through these characters, which I invented later, the Islamic fundamentalist character in that novel is called Blue, Lacivert in Turkish. I didn't meet anyone like Lacivert, but I had sensations in panels in Turkey where I struggle with Islamists and I also carry that inside me. You cannot figure out this is Lacivert. It's not like that. Then I developed these characters. I wrote this novel, all of my novels, very slowly in 3.5 years. So you develop this character thinking of this. But on the other hand, another important point is this. Once the book is published, and I think that it is the duty of the novelist to identify with the character completely. Once the book was published, and at that time, this was 9/11, everyone, Pamuk already wrote that novel, coincidentally. Everyone was reading. Some part of the Western world was enthusiastically reading. Another part, a minor part, was saying, well, you understood this Islamist fundamentalist too much. The guy is speaking and he is right, he sounds right, they were saying. But I only wrote what they were saying in a way. But when they say, you are giving the arguments of Islamists so well that one is influenced by this. And I say, yes, this is the duty of the novelist. My duty is not to pass ethical judgments to my characters. I do this with my interviews. I hate my character, actually, because he's a bad guy, killing people for politics. But in my novel, I make him convincing. I make him, all of my effort is to make him, once he is convincing, and once you have 3, 4, 5 people like that clashing, that's the power of novels. In fact, I went to Kars, the northern eastern town of Kars, to write Snow or to find location. But I was also engaging with people. I always make this joke about Kars, that first 200 pages you read in that book, whatever happens to Ka happened to me, including the joke, police is following me every time. And I said, okay, you're following, what's the point? What do you do this? Why do you do this? And he said, are you to protect me? This has also happened to me, So many details like in being printed 170 copies. These are all still around when I was there in end of 1999 in Kars.
So if we move to your incredible insight and knowledge about the Ottomans.
I am an illuminist. I'm a trickster, convince him that I had that much information. In fact, being a novelist is that you don't know too much, but you give this effect.
No. When you read Red, I mean, you know, it is a stunning. At the background is the whole, you know, the Ottoman Empire, the kings, the sultans, etc. And of course, there's a very specific story. Two things stand out. Several things stand out. The first is that Red is told. Every chapter is told by a different personality, a different character in the book. So there is room for confusion. I mean, readers can get confused.
But then at the top it writes, I'm a dog,
Right.
Red, I'm a murderer.
Yeah. But, so that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is his amazing knowledge on art. And Turkish art, Persian art, and Western art, because that's one of the major themes of the book. And then it's a murder thriller. It's an Agatha Christie. You know, I mean, you can also read it like an Agatha Christie or any of today's model, literally racing to the end of the book. So, I mean, how did this? I mean,
Okay, I'll tell you that as I said, I wanted to be a painter. I actually began to write a painterly novel about a contemporary Turkish painter. My God, in 5 minutes, as I begin to research and think about the book, the subject that Naipul tackled, the mimic man, was at the corner. Turkish art, don't tell your friends, is a little bit of a problematized by mimicking, so I don't want that. So I want a real thing. Thinking, my hand used to do the painting, so I want to write that sentiment which is in the book. Decided that it should be a historical novel. So I'm already have a painterly novel, but I didn't know which period. So then I begin to read, and it is mostly identifying and seeing that world. Yes, I read a lot, but I'm not a scholar. In fact, being a writer is knowing what to read, when to read, how to use is more important than reading everything. I can say that I am regretful of including detective plot in my book, My Name is Red, and I'm honest about it. Why I'm regretful? Because the subject was so vast, and I immediately realized that it would be hard to make these people read this vast, esoteric Ottoman Persian miniatures. Only people in Lahore would like such a thing, and they are very limited. And so I decided that I include some detective stories so other people also read it, but they like the detective story best in Lahore. But detective story gave me the possibility of, well, how to identify hints. You said Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes. So why don't I make personal style the hint, which my book argues was not here in my part of the world, just like character. Why don't I make them argue, discuss about character through personal style, and this would be the Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie's hint. Right. So we look at a lot of pictures, and that was what I wanted to do, write about pictures all the time. In fact, the novel is a sort of an art history visit. Not only we see a lot of Ottoman miniatures or Persian miniatures, but we also, most of the, or I will say half of the scenes in the book are rewritten, rewriting of Hüsrev and Shirin, or this or that. But I changed that, changed little of this, and mostly I'm looking at the painting that is miniature and using it as I used objects in my novel, Museum of Innocence, to tell a story, looking at the miniature and thinking and forcing my imagination to use it as a part of a novel. Right. Not this one works, that, but then I do it and continue like that. Yeah. If, you know, we have, I'm sure you have a lot of manuscripts like that in Lahore, lots of manuscripts in Istanbul, Persian manuscripts. A typical Persian manuscript book, I'm sure they are also like that, it would have 14, 12 miniatures. That these are the best scenes. That is, okay, Hamlet Yorick skull is a best scene. Every high school student knows some 40 best scenes like that. You can also reduce to all classical culture to that. And in fact, what I was doing in My Name is Red, I had the pictures of these 100 Bessines, and I changed their sequence. I also added my scenes to make it modern. Then I rewrote the whole thing. Not only my characters were seeing old miniatures, old pictures, but the whole setup was also tick, 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 tick. We also have other scenes. Yes, My Name is Red is thoroughly scholarly, but it was not the academic scholar. It was a scholar, me, who was enjoying looking at pictures like a child, and then using these child pictures to tell a novel, a story. Of course, there is a lot of more cerebral, more logical arrangements so that I won't look funny.
Marvelous, marvelous. I mean, incredible. Tell me your obsession with naming your books on colors. The Black Book, The White Castle,
Ahmed,
My Name is Red.
Obsession is a negative word. My love of music.
Colors. All right. Critique taken, yeah.
Second, there is, now more books are coming in this subject. Color symbolism in Islam. There are many books. The first one was especially in Central Asian mosques, in Persian blues. There is a subject of color symbolism in Islam. It's not in my books. I'm only opening. I'm scholarly, but I'm not using that. For me, color is more Tolstoy-like, Nabokov-like. It's part of the surface. It shows my attention to details. When you insert a color someplace, it also shows you I'm not interested only in the political drama or character drama or this or that. I am also interested in visuality of this world. Isn't this interest? Forget about character, politics, political Islam, this or that. I always want to say this. Isn't this wonderful being here in this world? Don't forget it's a short period. Maybe you don't even read my bad novel, but pay attention to colors, beauty of it, strangeness of it, and make your mind like this. Read my novels so that you see it's a strange world. This is color works in that. I'm not doing symbolic color or that color. I love my colors. I think you are obsessed not liking them.
I love them. Your depiction of women is so incredibly sensitive. The love stories that you have in your book, I mean, they bring you to tears when you read them, when lovers are parting or meeting together. Yet Turkey, I know, is a very, like many Muslim countries, is a very macho society. And I wondered this sensitivity that you have to your women characters and portraying them. I mean, I think of the great lovers of your books. How does that go down in Turkish society? I mean,
first of all, I have to be honest here. I was not like that at the beginning.
Right.
My first book, Cevdet Bey, is criticized by my friends for not being sensitive enough to women. But through my being 40 years of being writer, I also learned something from my criticism. There is a book criticizing the way I describe women, early works, you're right. From these criticism, I learned, so feminist criticism is good. I improved myself on it. In fact, just like self-imposed determination to be an Istanbul novelist and write Strangers in my mind, which is not taking in a middle-class secular society. I also had a self-imposed desire on this subject too, that I want to control, that I don't want to tell everything, and I also want to represent women as they are not represented. In fact, I began doing this in My Name is Red. At the center of that book is not the atelier of the painters, but Shekure's kitchen. Also, the center of strangest in my mind is these three sisters and their kitchen and Raya house kitchen. And I also benefited, although my family is middle class. My mother had an elder sister and a younger sister. They would get together and needle their husband and laugh a lot and make fun of their husbands. And I was a spy listening to their talks. They would let me in. That spirit is also in Strangers in my mind, where there are three sisters with crazy husbands. That is also autobiographical, but being a writer is taking your sentiments and managing them and using them in such a different place. Maybe you shouldn't be telling them. They don't believe your novel more. They believe. If you tell how you make your novel, you have to tell this only in the university. If you tell the readers how you make your novel, they believe you less. So you have to say, I don't know. It happened to me. I don't know. I was...
I had a vision.
I had a vision.
I had a vision. No, but Shekur in Red, I mean, you have really created a figure exactly from the Ottoman court. I mean, one believes that this woman is absolutely real. She lived 500 years ago, but she's absolutely real.
Thank you. Yeah. I hope you'll also write more about me.
Tell us about your new novel.
Wow.
You had a beautiful piece in the New York Times.
But that's not a novel. Then you got it as a novel. That's New York Times, I think. That's a piece for an introduction to a photo book, my next photo book. I'm also an amateurish photographer, but I have a good publisher. Yeah. I already did a book called Balkon. Now last many years, I'm photographing Istanbul at night too. And so I decided to make a photo book about the night views of Istanbul that I took. Also, I realized that the colors of our cities are changing. We are all moving from orange or yellow light to white light, and the city is changing. I'm not talking about architecture. This is colors. But I don't want to talk about this book, which is a minor thing. I am now writing a big book for the last 4 years. The title is Nights of Plague. Even if I say this, Nights of Plague, I want to make this meaning dramatizing, like Nights a movie. That's because it's like that. It has these qualities. Yes, you all know about the third plague pandemic that began in 1897. It started in China, in India, and Europe was so worried it's coming and it kills, and millions of people died in Asia. No one, very few died in Europe. Yeah. It was stopped, but medicine was the same. And don't forget, British doctors, colonial doctors were all over, but it didn't work. Millions died. No one died in Europe. Ottoman Empire is in the middle. Wouldn't Pamuk write about this? Yeah. Yes, it's my subject, right? Yeah. Wouldn't I write about? And the problem is also this. But I would love to talk about this when the book is published, The problem is also this, that not only in Muslim countries, but also in Christian countries, in history, it's especially in Poland, Russia, there are cholera uprisings. You say, don't do this, don't close your shop, don't get out of the house. Then people uprise. And then and also there is prejudice or common perceptions that Islamic societies believe in faith more than West. So if you say karantina, God decides, who cares about karantina? They will immediately say that. There are karantina istemezük. We don't want karantina. It is a Turkish saying. So it's imposing karantina is a social issue. And we were talking about my novel. It is in the history of plagues and all diseases, all pandemics. The first chapter is the local government does not take it seriously. It's always like that. So this happened. I wrote a book, Political Islam. They were all calling, did you finish your novel? Did you finish your novel? Now again they're calling me, since they know I wrote a book about
the plague.
A plague, they're all calling, but I'll take my time.
Was this prophetic? I mean...
No. They're never prophetic. These are common things that happen all the time.
Yeah.
I like these subjects, and they recur. And I'm a slow writer. In fact, I began writing, my name is Red, because political Islam was on the rise then.
Right.
And to argue Islam, picture, banning of picture, free speech, at the beginning it was so simple. But in that time, there was another party, came to power, kicked off by the army. I was still writing my novel. So if you argue that you write novels to catch up with the latest news, I am a slow writer, sir. I cannot do that. Why don't we do an interview and I criticize? But in the end, I am also motivated, like all realist writers, by the problems, but the problems pass away, then you have to stick to problems that stay all the time. Plague, political Islam, modernity, lower classes, upper classes, national identity, of course, and also sentiments, love, jealousy, this, belonging, this or that. These don't change. I have so many writer friends. There are writers who say, I have this story, I have this story, I have this story. I'm sometimes jealous of them because they are born with stories, or their minds are catching up stories, while my mind is catching up situations, philosophical problems. I wanted to paint. What is painting? Why do they paint differently there? So I think. Then I develop this towards a story. It's not someone's story. It's not something that someone tells me. But the beauty and the magic of literature is that someone has one story like that, and this guy writes that story, or this woman, in such a beautiful way. It is also the philosophical, social, big story. Right. Yes, so, the source of our stories are autobiographies, and of course also thinking philosophy. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I just wanted to ask you discreetly, I mean, how are you coping with working in Turkey today, writing? There have been so many waves of changes.
Maybe I'll interrupt. Some of my friends are in jail, is an answer. It's hard. It's responsibility. I cannot say we have democracy in Turkey except voting. And that is also getting to be a habit of not, whoever wins is not, if the government doesn't like it, they find an excuse to cancel that. Things are not that good. Things are not good politically, also free speech-wise. And also there's a lot of authoritarianism. Right. Whoever says what the government doesn't like, then 3 days later you're a renegade. Right. And people are intimidated by that. I am most critical of not even free speech, but atmosphere of fear and arbitrary imposition of power just because of arbitrary reasons, showing us the amazing power of the ruling party while everyone is on the corner looking with strangeness.
But you're not thinking of moving out?
Wow, you're asking me about my future plans. I am a professor at Columbia University. I came here, I was in fall, I was teaching in New York. Right. Maybe I'll invite you to my class.
Well, thank you. Well,
but I am also living mostly in Istanbul. This is possible still for me.
I will be asking the audience for questions, but let me just end saying one thing. I mean, Orhan is not only a writer and intellectual and everything else. He's also a museum lover. He set up his own museum.
But it's not about me. It's not about me.
And it's not about him. It's basically based on this beautiful love story novel he wrote, Museum of Innocence. And in the novel, the main character, who's crazy about this girl, is picking up all the odds and ends that she leaves scattered around, including 4,000 cigarette butts, and her scarves and her shoes, and he's created a real museum, which is, depicting this. Tell us about how you started this idea. I mean, I don't know of any other writer who's actually set up a museum.
Yes. This is, of course, related to the fact that there is a dead or painter in me. But the painter in me, it seems, in the years that I thought he was dead, converted into a contemporary artist. You know, they're all doing that. They're not doing any pictures anymore. So I decided that I like museums, that I want to find a way of associating myself with the museum. This is how I write my novels. I'm not saying I like plagues, but I like also 16th century miniatures. I like, for example, this is how writers also write books. So I decided, I thought of this, that I will write a novel in which, I will write a novel and I will open a museum in which the novel will operate as an annotated catalog of the museum, where annotations are manipulated and written in such a way that the sequence reads like a novel if you don't put any pictures. In fact, the novel Museum of Innocence is the catalog of the museum in Istanbul. Unfortunately, the only problem was I couldn't finish the museum on time. The ideal was the museum opens, you see many objects, you read the novel, they are all described, and it's a story, just like, again, Shklovsky, this theory. But the painter never comes on time, the other guy does something different. So I decided I'll publish the novel, open the museum. It's not that I had a successful novel, then make a museum of it. In fact, the theory and poetics and how the architecture should be is also in the novel. I know which building. I already bought the building when I was finishing the novel. And since the story is this, the boy loves the girl so much that the story is said he collects everything she touches or everything that reminds him of her. So I was also collecting these articles, these objects from family, from flea markets of Istanbul, so that I put them in a museum and also describe them as Flaubert described his beloved slippers. That was my starting point. Flaubert writes a letter to his beloved. Your slippers are with me. I'm looking at them all the time. My God, this is a writer is looking at an object, and French are good at it because humanity did not know how to look at an object before. So also Georges Perec, modern French novel describing objects, Nouveau Romancier, and all that formed an idea that I'll put together objects, then combine them with stories, then open a museum, then publish the book. Really, it all happened and it worked, and the museum, I was there just the other day, was full of international people. Turks also begin to come.
Well, I think I'll take some questions. If we could have the lights on, could the girls come forward with the mics?
I have one or two things about questions. Please, one question. Don't say, what do you think of Turkish politics and which color you like most? Yeah. Only one question. 10 minutes left. Okay.
Yeah. Is there a mic here? Can you stand up, please? Stand up.
Hello.
Is there a mic? I don't think we can hear from. Excuse me. We can't hear. Where's the mic?
I give the mic.
Ask the question, please. Don't make a statement. Ask the question, please. Please tell us something about my writing process. Yes, I'll do. Please sit down. My girlfriend goes to work. I sit down at the table. Okay, but there's something wrong with the microphone.
Mr. Pamuk, such a innovative, the way which you are elaborating the things are lively. You are looking as a package of love. Nazim Hikmat, your discussion was not as innovative as I'm describing the things. So please do listen me.
No.
Nazam Hikmat was one.
We won't listen to you. We won't listen to a person who, we won't. We interrupt you. We'll ask another question. And the question that, yes, your question.
Sorry.
Yes?
Is there a microphone?
There's a microphone here. Sorry. Thank you.
Is it socialistic novel? Is it modernistic novel? Is it experimental novel? I think it's experimental. It has social sides. It wants to be everything, you know.
I think all of his novels.
I have a question here. Some of us, like you, are also New Yorkers, and I want to find out, is New York in any way a city that will also inform some of your current or future work? Because it's very different from an ancient city like Istanbul.
One of the popular questions my New York friends are asking me, and I am embarrassed, you know, novels are also our reaction to our humanity, our lives. So why don't I take, now that I'm teaching there for the last 12 years and spending half a year there, why don't I write about these people? I know, good question. And my answer to it is this, actually. I know my house in New York, I know my friend's house in New York, but I don't know the real New Yorker's house as much. I'm always a guest there. I can write a New York novel as in my position, and that wouldn't be a New York novel, that would be an immigrant's New York, an immigrant professor's New York novel. That I can do. But I cannot write as if I am born and living there. But I'm born and living in Istanbul.
Have you got a mic? Who has a mic?
Okay, please ask.
Hello?
Please make it short.
Yes, it is short. Your novels have intricate and detailed construction. I'm curious to know, is your story structure, especially of the Museum of Innocence, in any way influenced technically by your architectural studies?
Yes. In fact, as I said, the architecture of the building, Museum of Innocence, some of you have been there, was already decided before I finished the novel, and it's described in the book that we have this kind of a hole in the middle where you can see from the top all the objects down. It's exactly like that. Yes, there is some influence of architecture. But it was not a real question, actually, just a question to ask a question.
The guy in the suit.
Yes.
Just a minute.
Okay, he is asking about classical Oedipal myth because in my book, the red-haired woman, I allude to them and compare Oedipus Rex with Firdevsi's story in Rustam and Sohram, which I learned later. They, I argue, are similar or stories that reflect each other. One honoring Oedipus Rex is honoring the son killing his father, and we moderns liking that. Wow, poor Oedipus, we're not crying for the father, we're crying for the boy who kills his father. Well, we are doing it right here. We are crying for the father who kills his son. What do you think of this? They had a story in Europe where the son who kills his father is honored. Oedipus complex, Oedipus modernity, individuality. And we have a story where the father kills the son and we are sorry for the father. What does that imply? Those implications I argued in my book, Red-Haired Woman. Of course, we want, like, we don't know about this authority. The father is killing the son, and we are sorry for the father. There. In fact, when Oedipus was first written, they were also in father's side. The audiences were very happy when Oedipus blinds himself. He did not listen to God. I'm telling the Greek interpretation. God said, you're gonna sleep with your mother, you're gonna, oh, it's horrible, I wanna kill myself, and avoid that, and kill myself. And he kills, everyone is okay. Now this bad guy who does this, kills his father, is dead. But today, oh, we're sorry for this guy. Because we are moderns. In fact, in 1860, they restaged Oedipus in Paris in a new interpretation. It was so successful, it came to Vienna, and our doctor Sigmund Freud saw it. And oh, I'm also thinking about killing father. Why don't I call this my guy or my theory, Oedipus? Then, just like Karl Marx making Balzac famous, he made Sophocles famous. But no one made Firdevsi famous. I'm doing my best to do that too.
Right. Last two questions. Who's got the mic?
Can we, Ahmed, we've been asked now to, we've run over the time.
Evacuate is the word.
We'll have our next session here at 2:30. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, give Orhan Pamuk a very big hand.